So this is the start of a drosh, and the opening is going to alienate a few people on the senior dues membership category, but please bear with me. I like to go to sleep watching Instagram Reels. See, I did it. Instagram Reels, for those not, Phyllis is looking at me, are like very short little videos of nonsense, but they're very good for allowing your brain to turn off. And since having a child and taking a congregational gig, I can no longer have the patience and energy for a novel. Instead, I'm watching these 5-second nonsense things. So one of the genres of these little videos that I have gotten into, I'll make an embarrassing admission, are chiropractic videos. Has anybody watched these? They're so good. There's somebody in there. Yeah. He's 13. It's always the picture of somebody, and the caption says, "The loudest crack you've ever heard." And he says, "Nobody has ever cracked my neck." And then some chiropractor takes him, and they make this god-awful sound. And then, they start crying, and there's a cheer, and then you watch the next one. They're very, very relaxing. Because everybody just gets these amazing, so good. So I've been watching these things to try to, diminish my cortisol levels about the state of the world. And it inspired me this week to go to a chiropractor for the first time in many, many years. I thought, I don't want to just watch it. I want to experience it. So I went into the chiropractor whose office is right next to my dry cleaner. That's all I knew about him, but I see him all the time. So I went into the office and met Dr. John. And turns out Dr. John specializes in mixed martial arts fighters. So we have roughly the same, issues. I'm a congregational rabbi after this year. We have roughly the same issues. And Dr. John took me back into his little room, and I expected him to, crack my neck and make me cry and feel better about the world. And instead, he started plugging in these electrodes into my back that looked like an EKG machine or something. And I didn't exactly know what he was doing, but I didn't want to ask. And he said, "This might hurt a little bit." And it hurt a lot. It turns on this electric current that makes your muscles ripple and bubble and do all of these things. And I guess it's supposed to be relaxing. It did not feel relaxing. And I laid there for 10 minutes, and I didn't want to, indicate I was in pain because, again, he works with mixed martial arts fighters, and I didn't want to be a total wimp. And then he took him off, and then he cracked my back, and it was wonderful. But I asked him after it was all over, what did you do to me at the beginning? What exactly was that was going on with the electrodes? That was something that I saw on Instagram. And he said, "We put those on for 10 minutes before doing an adjustment because it relaxes all of the muscles which are all tensed up and which would guard against me being able to make a big movement." He said, "If I don't help your muscles to relax, if you try to do a big move, not only will it not help, it's likely to hurt you." And I thought there was a lot of spiritual wisdom in that. It's a lot of spiritual wisdom in the idea that you can't just make a big transformative change without having done all of the work that leads up to that. That real change in our lives doesn't happen in one big crack. Real change in our lives takes a whole progression of work that gets us to the place where we're able to do the bold and scary thing. And instead of having it hurt us, it can feel really good. And one of the big mistakes that Jews make around the High Holy Days, coming up in just over a month, is people come into the service at Rosh Hashanah, and even more so at Yom Kippur, and expect that in the time that they're sitting in the sanctuary, reading and singing ancient Hebrew words on Yom Kippur, hungry and with a headache, that something spiritually transformative is supposed to happen to them while they're doing it. And when they leave at the end of the day, and they haven't been transformed by the experience, they feel like there's something wrong with the ritual, it doesn't really work, or with them. And the truth is, there is no chance that a High Holy Day service is going to change your life if you haven't spent the month ahead of time thinking about what you want to get out of this season of change. There is no way in which sitting in a service hungry and tired is going to help you reconcile the difficult relationships of your life or change the broken patterns that you've been living or invite you to think entirely differently if you're starting thinking about that, starting planning, starting resolving on that day. It doesn't work. You're just going to hurt yourself. If you try to run a marathon and you haven't trained, you're not getting very far. If you try to move a stuck joint and you haven't let the muscle release a little bit, the joint isn't going to move. And if you try to jerk your heart open rather than giving it time to soften, all it's going to be is heartbreak. We've been gifted this year with extra time. Jewish holidays are never on time. They're either early or late. This year they're late. Not until October is the start of Rosh Hashanah. Not until mid-October, practically, is Yom Kippur. We have all of this time. I'll still write my sermons 3 days ahead of time. But I'd like to maybe try, and maybe if I commit to you in public, to do some of the work over the course of, well, starting now, so that I can actually find something worth saying, rather than trying to yank it out of me painfully when I'm staring down the deadline. I don't just have work, and the cantor doesn't just have work, and Lord knows the executive director doesn't just have work to lead up to the High Holy Days. We all have work that can start now. Now is the time to take a look at our lives and say, what is the tired script that we have been living out over and over and over again, that this year it's time to break? What is the phone call that we have been putting off now for weeks or months or years that it's time to start psyching ourselves up to make? What's the doctor we really need to book a visit with? What's the therapist we really need to check back into and make sure our heads are screwed on straight? What's the barrier in our relationships that we just can't seem to get over, that we need to start by naming and talking about so we have a chance of making it better? This is the time to do the work, guys. Because if we expect that it can all happen like magic on the holidays, we set ourselves up for disappointment in our Jewish traditions and in ourselves. This whole period of time in the Torah reading, we're reading the book of Deuteronomy, Moses' extended speech before the people can cross over into the Promised Land. The action is really all over in the Torah. We've already left Egypt. We've already gotten the laws at Mount Sinai. We've made our way through the wilderness. We're just at the edge of a new chapter. We could skip the whole book of Deuteronomy. We could just say we're there, okay, and then we crossed in and lived kind of happily, but not so happily ever after. Instead, the Torah's wisdom is to invite us to pause at the edge. To pause at the edge of the promised land, to check back in with our history, to remind ourselves of everything we've been through, to check back in with our values and aspirations, to remind us of who we want to be when we get to the other side, to check back in with each other as a community, to know who our marching partners will be because none of us can make it there alone, to kindle in ourselves a sense of hope and possibility that blessings really could lie on the other side of the river and that the hard times really could be past and left in the wilderness. Invite us all to Deuteronomy's wisdom, to the wisdom of the month of Elul that prepares us for the Yamim Noraim, for the holidays, for the wisdom of a mom who looks at her daughter and says, remember the lesson of this day is that if you spend the time and put in the care, you can do anything. If you don't, nothing is possible. But if you're willing to invest in yourself, invest in what matters, invest in the preparation, then you can shine. All of us can. Shabbat Shalom.